Okay, top 5 things you never hear on the internet. I don't like cat videos. I love Nickelback. I just hate that Keanu Reeves. Actually, it's pronounced Yif. I respect your opinion. So tonight I am going to speak the unspeakable. I respect your right to hold your opinion, even if it's different than mine. All I ask in return is that you respect my right to hold my opinion and respect the rights of others downstairs in the comments. My goal on this channel is now and always has been to share my opinions, even if they are sometimes a little controversial, with the hope that we can all engage in meaningful and productive discussions. I will never unnecessarily alienate anyone. I will never attack anyone personally. And I will always endeavor to understand the perspectives of those who I disagree with. That's the Eric Gronsky promise.
Join our hands together and we'll sink in quicksand. Run it out together till we misunderstand. Adopt a life of silence on a trim scrap of land, or reconsider living on the other hand.
Hey, okay, so welcome to Gronsky Books. Ayn Rand is the most controversial author I've read all year. And today I'm talking about Rand's second novel, Anthem, first published in 1938. Anthem is a slim novel, a novella really. This is all commentary and revision material, so it's a very short book. And on the surface, it's a very simple book. It's a dystopian story about a man persecuted for his ideas, so he runs away into the mountains. Anthem is written in the dystopian tradition, which dates way back to Plato's Republic, which speculates on what the ideal communal state might look like. The prose in Anthem is heavily stylized as what I would call biblically adjacent, in that there are no purple adjectives. So in that way it's stylized. And now, sitting here in our tunnel, we wonder about these words. It is forbidden not to be happy, for as it has been explained to us, men are free and the earth belongs to them, and all things on earth belong to men. And the will of men together is good for all, and so all men must be happy. To me, that sounds more like ancient mythical writing translated into English rather than a modernist take on fiction, which is why I call it stylized. The novel explores a society in which there is no sense of self, and this is explored through the characters' subjugation by language. There are no personal pronouns in this futuristic world. They have all been abolished through the collective worship of we. So you would never say, I am going into the field. You would always say, we are going into the field. You would never say, my name is Eric. You would say, our name is Eric. Although none of these characters have such personal names as Eric. And we'll get to that in a second. Anthem is an absolutist epistemological novel about the pursuit of rational thought. But what is it exactly about? The narrator of this story, whose name is Equality 72521, lives in a collectivist society where it is a sin to be alone, it is a sin to think for yourself, and it is a sin to work outside your prescribed profession. Equality 2521 is a street sweeper by government mandate. Now, this is a futuristic world, but the only real jobs are kind of agrarian in nature. You got street sweepers and you've got farmers and general laborers. The greatest technological advancement in this world is the candle. So there are no machines. Through the course of the novel, Equality 2521 discovers relics of the past being our present. And these discoveries lead him to discover electricity. When Equality 2521 brings the scientific discovery to the attention of the World Council, a ruling body who openly controls the population through eugenics and forced labor, they deem this discovery, this scientific pursuit, as a crime on many levels. Because 1, he worked alone, 2, he pursued knowledge without permission, and 3, he created a thing for the sake of creating it. The World Council sentences Equality 2521 to immediate torture and death. But while he's imprisoned, he manages to escape and make it off into the mountains, where he discovers an old forgotten home and the wonders of this ancient library. I've left a few details out. There's a love interest, and that has its own themes in the book, but they don't exactly tie into the rest of the points that I'm trying to make here. For the most part, that's the core of the story. And I realize I've basically just spoiled it for you, but the book is 90 years old. So, I mean, you don't really read this book for the story anyway, okay? You read it for the philosophy, and that is why we are discussing it today. The story is simple. It's an allegory, much like the allegories of the Bible. It's not so much the story on the surface, it's what the story means. Okay, so I can't imagine anybody reading this book and deciding that the society that Equality 2521 lives in is a just society. This liberal collectivist society that their narrator lives in is predicated upon such a perversion of equality and equity that nobody living in our time who espouses the virtues of equality and equity would ever cop to this as the end game. Nobody wants this. So in a sense, my major criticism of Anthem is that Ayn Rand has created a straw man argument in that Equality 72521 could only be virtuous in the face of such an unjust society, thus proving Rand's point that objectivism is virtuous and collectivism is evil, even if her idiosyncratic vision of collectivism has evolved to a final end that nobody in this day and in this age intends or envisions. The very same parlor trick could be done the other way around, where objectivism and individualism are perverted beyond all measure, and the only virtuous man left in the world is the one who believes in equality. Now, this criticism was voiced pretty vocally during Rand's time, and Rand's rebuttal to this criticism was that the liberal collectivists were in denial that this is where their philosophy would lead to. They say that they don't want a society that looks like the one in her book, the one that is ruled by eugenics and forced labor and the denial of the self. But she believes that collectivism inevitably leads to that, and that we are in denial that we are embracing slavery when we are embracing equality. But I reject that out of hand. Nowhere in history that I've ever seen where a society built on equality and equity has ever led to slavery.
But Eric, the Declaration of Independence says all men are created equal, and we had slavery in the United States. Yes, all men are created equal. All white men were created equal, and only men. I hardly call that a nation based on equality and equity.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't see that as a logical or fact-based philosophy in the slightest. Okay, so Ayn Rand exalted the individual, but specifically did not exalt the collective of humanity. Rand hated humanity for its failures to live up to its potential as a group of individuals. To make up for this failure, Rand believed that the individual should worship himself as a god. Quote, "Man exists for his own sake, that the pursuit of his own happiness is his highest moral purpose, that he must not sacrifice himself to others, nor sacrifice others to himself." Now, I don't disagree with all of that, specifically not sacrificing others to myself. But I don't believe that I exist for my own sake. I don't believe that pursuing my own happiness is my highest moral imperative. And I don't believe that I must never sacrifice myself for others. If you're a parent, you don't believe this. If you're a veteran, you don't believe this. If you are just the kind of person who believes in helping those in need, you don't believe this. Now, Rand wasn't the lone literary figure critiquing the subjugation of the self. Aldous Huxley and George Orwell challenged many of the same philosophies challenged by Ayn Rand. The difference being is that Rand's proposed solution of individualistic self-worship is wholly unique among these writers and solidly in the camp of the objectivists. Rand's presumption that true liberty is only possible through the absolute freedom of the self, and anything less is slavery. Now that is some black and white thinking. Not to mention that this is a sophomoric view of freedom that few people in the real world actually subscribe to. Most of us understand that living a life completely untethered from the rules of society is utterly impossible and in fact undesirable. Now, I'm not undercutting the importance of the self or the value of personal liberties. Personal liberties are core to my being. I'm only advocating for reasonable compromise as we take our place in society, our responsibilities to society and within society. Yes, we do have responsibilities to society because we do live within it, just as you have responsibilities to your household because you live within it. It is not slavery for you to take out the trash. It is not slavery for you to cook dinner 3 times a week in your household. That is reasonable compromise. That is participating in your household. Just as living by the rules of society is a compromise. But what is a just and efficient society? What is a reasonable compromise to live within that society? Those are the questions that have birthed every single political party in the history of forever, and I am not here to settle that debate or to try to tell you how to answer that question. That is for you to decide for yourself. Now, Ayn Rand is a complex and perplexing character, and her reputation confuses me. And I want to talk about that for a minute. Most academic philosophers working during Rand's time weren't even aware of her work, or if they were, they just dismissed it. Rand attributed this dismissal to collectivist bias, but critics point to other factors leading to this out-of-hand dismissal of her ideas. Academics accused Ayn Rand of having a too idiosyncratic interpretation of Western philosophy, twisted too much to her own ends to be taken seriously by intellectuals of the time. This distortion of established philosophical principles, coupled with Rand's tendency to rely on ad hominem attacks and her unwillingness to tolerate disagreement with her views, generally discredited her among her contemporaries. But by the time she died at age 77 in 1982, she'd managed to become one of the leading thinkers of the West, if not the most controversial, and a spokesperson for objectivism. How? Because despite Rand's unfavorable reputation among academics and intellectuals, her novels, specifically The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, continued to enjoy great commercial success with the libertarian and conservative public. At the time of her death, her followers included some high-ranking members of the Reagan administration, probably most notably Alan Greenspan. In the 1990s and 2000s, her works contributed to the increased popularity in libertarianism in the United States, and she even became a symbol of the Tea Party movement, a position she no doubt would have abhorred should she have lived to see it. As early as the 1960s, Rand was incensed at the co-opting of objectivist vocabulary by the libertarians, what she called the hippies of the right. She accused the libertarians of disregarding morality and flirting with anarchism. Anarchism, she called, the most irrational, anti-intellectual notion ever spun by the context-dropping, whim-worshipping fringe of the collectivist movement. So she was accusing libertarians of the same things she was accusing the collectivists of. The collectivists she was trying to take down in her book, Anthem. Yet these are the very people who are holding Ayn Rand up as their hero. I don't understand it. And it doesn't stop there. Ayn Rand was an avowed atheist. She believed that faith was detrimental to reason. Rand unabashedly supported abortion. An embryo has no rights. She rejected all political parties. Rand abhorred free market manipulation. None of these things are reflective in modern conservative values, yet Ayn Rand is held up as a conservative hero. And yes, I do understand that libertarians aren't straight conservatives. I understand there's overlap. I don't want to get into all that here. But libertarians in the United States do tend to align themselves with conservative politics. So maybe, unfortunately for Rand, she's only ever remembered as the anti-socialist, pro-capitalist, champion of self-sufficiency. Not that she isn't those things, but it's reductive to think of her in such simplistic terms. But maybe I'm not too sympathetic after all. Nobody who deliberately misrepresents reality in order to stubbornly advance an ill-begotten philosophy should complain when that philosophy is co-opted by a faction of people who don't understand it. But what do I know? I'm not a philosopher. So at me down in the comments if you want. But remember, keep it civil with one another. I've seen where conversations about Ayn Rand lead, and we don't need it to get ugly down there, okay? So thanks very much for watching Gronsky Books, and I will see you in the next one.